May the 10th. Received a letter from Mr. Franching of Peckham asking us to dine with him tonight at 7 o'clock to meet Mr. Hardfur Huttle, a very clever writer for the American papers. Franching apologised for the short notice, but said he had at the last moment been disappointed of two of his guests and regarded us as old friends who would not mind filling up the gap. Carrie rather demurred at the invitation, but I explained to her that Franching was very well off and influential, and we could not afford to offend him. And we are sure to get a good dinner and a good glass of champagne, which never agrees with you, Carrie replied sharply. I must say it was quite a distinguished party, and although we did not know anybody personally, they all seemed to be quite swells. Franching had got a professional waiter, and evidently spared no expense. I sat next to Mrs. Field at dinner. She seemed a well-informed lady, but was very deaf. It did not much matter, for Mr. Hardfur Huttle did all the talking. He is a marvellously intellectual man, and says things which from other people would seem quite alarming. One observation struck me as being absolutely powerful, though not to my way of thinking, of course. Mrs. Purdy happened to say, "You are certainly unorthodox, Mr. Huttle." Mr. Huttle, with a peculiar expression, I can see it now, said in a slow, rich voice, "Mrs. Purdy, orthodox is a grandiloquent word implying sticking in the mud. If Columbus and Stevenson had been orthodox, there would neither have been the discovery of America nor the steam engine." There was quite a silence. It appeared to me that such teaching was absolutely dangerous. And yet I felt, in fact we must all have felt, there was no answer to the argument. A little later on, Mrs. Purdy, who is Franching's sister and also acted as hostess, rose from the table, and Mr. Huttle said, "Why, ladies, do you deprive us of your company so soon? Why not wait while we have our cigars?" The effect was electrical. The ladies, including Carrie, were in no way inclined to be deprived of Mr. Huttle's fascinating society, and immediately resumed their seats amid much laughter and a little chaff. Mr. Huttle said, "Well, that's a real good sign. You shall not be insulted by being called orthodox any longer." Mrs. Purdy, who seemed to be a bright and rather sharp woman, said, "Mr. Huttle, we'll meet you halfway, that is, till you get halfway through your cigar. That, at all events, will be the happy medium." I shall never forget the effect the words "happy medium" had upon him. He positively alarmed me. He said something like the following: "Happy medium, indeed. Do you know, happy medium are two words which mean miserable mediocrity? I say go first class or third. Marry a duchess or her kitchen maid. The happy medium means respectability, and respectability means insipidness. Does it not, Mr. Pooter?" I was so taken aback by being personally appealed to that I could only bow apologetically and say I feared I was not competent to offer an opinion. He continued with an amazing eloquence that made his unwelcome opinions positively convincing. "The happy medium is nothing more or less than a vulgar half-measure. It is half-hearted, respectable, in fact, a happy medium, and will spend the rest of his days in a suburban villa with a stucco column portico resembling a four-post bedstead." We all laughed. "That sort of thing," continued Mr. Huttle, "belongs to a soft man, with a soft beard, with a soft head, and a made tie that hooks on." This seemed rather personal, and twice I caught myself looking in the glass of the chiffonier, for I had on a tie that hooked on, and why not? If these remarks were not personal, they were rather careless, and so were some of his subsequent observations, which must have made both Mr. Franching and his guests rather uncomfortable. I asked Mr. Franching quietly to excuse me, as I did not wish to miss the last train, which we very nearly did, by the way, through Carrie having mislaid the little cloth cricket cap which she wears when we go out. It was very late when Carrie and I got home, but on entering the sitting room I said, "Oh, Carrie, what do you think of Mr. Hardfur Huttle?" She simply answered, "How like Lupin." The same idea occurred to me in the train. The comparison kept me awake half the night. Mr. Huttle was, of course, an older and more influential man, but he was like Lupin. and it made me think how dangerous Lupin would be if he were older and more influential. I always feel people are happier who live a simple, unsophisticated life. I believe I am happy because I am not ambitious. Somehow I feel that Lupin, since he's been with Mr. Perkupp, has become content to settle down and follow the footsteps of his father. This is a comfort. May the 13th. A terrible misfortune has happened. Lupin is discharged from Mr. Perkupp's office, and I scarcely know how I am writing this diary. I was away from the office last Saturday, the first time I've been absent through illness for 20 years. I believe I was poisoned by some lobster. Mr. Perkupp was also absent, as fate would have it, and our most valued customer, Mr. Crowbillen, went to the office in a rage and withdrew his custom. My boy Lupin not only had the assurance to receive him, but recommended him the firm of Giltis & Sons and Company Limited. In my own humble judgment, and though I have to say it against my own son, this seems an act of treachery. This morning I receive a letter from Perkupp, informing me that Lupin's services are no longer required, and an interview with me is desired at 11 o'clock. I went down to the office with an aching heart, dreading an interview with Mr. Perkupp, with whom I have never had a cross word. My mind wandered so at the office that I could not do my work properly. As I expected, I was sent for by Mr. Perkupp, and the following conversation ensued. Mr. Perkupp said, "Good morning, Mr. Pooter. This is a very serious business. Now, what I should like you to do is this. You yourself might write to Mr. Crowbillen and explain to him that your son was only taken on as a clerk, quite an inexperienced one, in fact, out of the respect the firm had for you, Mr. Pooter. I don't suggest that you should speak in too strong terms of your son's conduct, but I may add that had he been a son of mine, I should have condemned his interference with no measured terms. That I leave to you. I think the result will be that Mr. Crowbillen will see the force of the foolish step he has taken, and our firm will neither suffer in dignity nor in pocket." I said, "Would you like to see the letter before I send it?" Mr. Perkupp said, "Oh, no, I'd better not. I'm supposed to know nothing about it, and I have every confidence in you. You must write the letter carefully. We're not very busy. You'd better take the morning tomorrow, or the whole day if you like."